Where is unity now? What is unity now? In 1902, Charles Fillmore wrote this about the unity movement. Unity is a link in a great educational movement inaugurated by Jesus Christ. Our objective is to discern the truth in Christianity and prove it. The truth that we teach is not new, neither do we claim special revelations or discovery of new religious principles. Our purpose is to help and teach mankind to use and prove the eternal truth taught by the Master. And I think about the diversity of how culture in North America has changed since 1902. And what remains of this mission statement or description of unity? Well, to prove the eternal truth, it is still a spiritual educational movement because of what it is that it stands for. And when I was looking at what does it stand for to me, with me at this moment, it stands for a place where people can make a breakthrough in their lives. And oftentimes when people come into a unity church or center, their lives may be broken. They may be broken down. And they need a breakthrough. They need something that is going to move them into the next place. And what they may not realize is the seeming breakdown is due to the end of a phase, the end of a cycle of their life experience. And there may be this latency period or a dry period that may last for however long it lasts. But it is an in-between place. And there may be a time where they move into a new phase of consciousness, which is outpictured through coming into a place such as this, where there is something that is taught or related that is beyond the previous structure that they had within their consciousness at the time. And I remember back in it was probably about 1977, I went to Unity Village in Lee's Summit, Missouri. It was cold, a February night, very cold in Lee's Summit, Missouri that particular year. And I remember being taken in by a good number of people there at the village. And they treated me with tremendous kindness. They didn't know, and I didn't know at the time, my plans to become a minister. I was just in transition to the U.S. Coast Guard Academy, where I took some training. But I wanted to go because I had been within the Unity teachings for a few years. And there came into my life experience a tremendous feeling of kindness and love and compassion. And sometimes when we look at the Unity teachings, they seem like they're kind of black and white. Do this, get that. Be a metaphysician of your mind. And it's kind of a mind science. And that's kind of the way, science of mind or creative spiritual living is now. But behind that is an essence of compassion and love that is so vital to the nurturing of our soul to help us move forward. We can have all types of breakthroughs in our health and our finances and our relationships, but if there isn't a sense of kindness within our own life experience, then it can become very dry. And also when I was back at Unity Village, I said, this place feels like a very kind place, a very loving place. And they said something kind of strange. One woman said anyway, well, it's all based on what's called the Jesus Christ standard, and that we're all trying to live into that standard. And I think of those words so many years ago, and how is that even applicable to 2018? When I talk about the Jesus Christ standard to anyone else, they kind of laugh and they say, well, how is anybody supposed to live up to that? And including myself at times. But I grew up on that. Even at times during the darkest phases and cycles of this life experience, I'm sure that everybody in this room can relate to, it seemed like a foolish notion. How can anybody live into that type of place? But today, my intention with you in our sharing is to build a bridge so that isn't some kind of an exceptional, far off, well, maybe someday practice of being, but that it is a potentiality and a livingness within each one of our souls here and now. So what is unity now? It is a way of a breakthrough. And I'm not coming from a place of wanting to say that we need to adhere to necessarily a Jesus way of life. I've learned full well that people have stuff that they're working on around Jesus to accept or reject, to allow. But this is all about one's own perception. This is all about one's own past experience. In one way, Jesus was a millennial. He lived 30, 31, 32, 33 years at the time of a passage of a whole new millennium. So Jesus was a millennial. He was a radical guy. And that's what I love about him so much. He didn't adhere to the culture of the times. In fact, he questioned everything because he had a place of clarity. He was living from a place that was not culturally determined. And that was the rub of his life. But he came to interject something into the consciousness of humanity that has grown and grown and grown. Into an ethic, really, in a way, of kindness, among other things. And kindness isn't just a Christian intention. If you read any of the words of the Dalai Lama from Tibetan Buddhism, he simply says, "My religion is kindness." So in every spiritual faith or path, there is built in to it, when the mind is stilled and the emotions are cleared of pain and trauma, there is an inherent quality of kindness that lives within each one of us. And it's the core of spiritual community to foster that for each other, with each other. Because when people come into a Unity Center for the first time, they may be up against all types of mass mind images of the world that are saying one after another, the world is an unkind place. All the while, that which dwells within us as the fire within is a flame of kindness. And so how do we build a bridge from sometimes the jaded notion of where we're at within this life experience to a place of kindness, of letting go that which we're holding on to as our belief system, as our foundational thinking? Years ago in the Unity Church in Sacramento, California, there was offered during the beginning of the service, during the announcements and much of the same things that we do here, an affirmation that we all repeated together. We are spiritual beings living in a spiritual universe and governed by spiritual law. So that takes the identity out of the separate self and aligns us with, well, I'm a spiritual being. Having a spiritual experience, living in a spiritual universe. So when we look at this notion of the Jesus Christ standard, if we are a spiritual being, which he basically promoted in the fullness of his life, then it doesn't seem so far away from us. I've told this story once before, I believe, here, but I want to share it again, because what I'm speaking about is a state of consciousness. Christ consciousness is what it is that we are. It is not some far off goal. It is what we are. That is our native state as spiritual beings, underneath the ebbs and flows of the personality. I was in a restaurant in 1978 with a girlfriend of mine, and I was having dinner, and all of a sudden, there was a shift that took place in me, in my consciousness, and my heart blew open with absolute joy, and I wept in this booth in this restaurant for probably 10 minutes. I just wept. My girlfriend was kind enough to not get up and walk out. She just simply said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "It's here. It's here." And I looked over on the people on the other side of the restaurant, and fortunately they were just taking care of their own business and having their own exchange and eating dinner. But I wanted to get up. I wanted to get up on top of a table and say, "It's here." And you can only imagine what would have happened at that moment. At the least, I would have been given a to-go box and shuffled out the door. But I'm so grateful for those types of experiences because they are living experiences, felt, knowing experiences where I can stand here and talk and share with you, and it's not just about something written on a page. It is actual, authentic, the authentic showing up of Christ's consciousness, or at least what I experienced that I can call it, but it was of the most tremendous, rarefied essence of love. And it comes and goes in this life, does it not? It comes and it goes. We never really know exactly when it's going to show up. But there's an illustration that I would like to share with you about this process. It's a story that a friend of mine sent me not too long ago. Two men, both seriously ill, occupied the same hospital room. And one man was allowed to sit up in his bed for an hour each afternoon to help drain the fluid from his lungs. His bed was next to the room's only window. And the other man had to spend all his time flat on his back, unable to move. The men talked for hours on end, and they spoke of their wives and their families, their homes and their careers, their involvement in past military service, and where they had gone on vacation. And every afternoon, when the man in the bed by the window could sit up, he would pass the time by describing to his roommate all the things that he could see outside the window. And the man in the other bed began to live for those 1 hour periods where his world would be broadened and enlivened by the accounting and the activity and color of the world outside. Reportedly, the window overlooked a park with a lovely lake. Ducks and swans played on the water while children sailed their model boats, and young lovers walked arm in arm amidst flowers of every color, and a fine view of the city skyline could be seen in the distance. And as the man by the window described all of this in exquisite detail, the man on the other side of the room would close his eyes and imagine this picturesque scene. And one warm afternoon, the man by the window described a parade passing by. Although the other man could not hear the band, he could see it in his mind's eye as the gentleman by the window portrayed it with descriptive words. And days and weeks and months passed. One morning, a day nurse arrived to bring water for their baths, only to find the lifeless body of the man by the window who had died peacefully in his sleep. She was saddened and called the hospital attendants to take the body away, and as soon as it was appropriate, the other man asked if he could be moved next to the window. And the nurse was happy to make the switch, and after making sure he was comfortable, she left him alone. And slowly and painfully, with great determination, he was able to prop himself up on one elbow to look out for the first time at the real world outside. He strained to slowly turn to look out the window beside the bed, and it faced a blank wall. The man asked the nurse what could have compelled his deceased roommate, who had described such wonderful things outside this window. And the nurse responded that the man was blind and could not even see the wall. She said, perhaps he just wanted to encourage you. Sometimes all you and I see is a wall. And sometimes we're blind to the way the world really is. When I was looking at the word encourage, I saw the words encourage, to be encouraged. And that many teachings of the world teach courage, teach us how to be stronger. And there is this call within the unity teachings to own our courage and own our strength. And how do we do that? Well, it takes kindness and an ability to release our story, the pain of our story. And I'll be the first one to tell you that I don't claim to have it all together in terms of the unity teachings. But one thing that is arising within my life at this time, something beautiful is happening within my consciousness that perhaps you can relate to. Because, there's lots of people that demonstrate greater prosperity than I do, greater healing ability, greater clarity in relationships and so on. But one thing that I notice that is arising, that is so beautiful, is kindness. Kindness for self. Kindness for other people. The harshness is somehow wonderfully and magically just kind of dropping away. And that if there's anything of Christ's consciousness, or the consciousness of the real, let's just call it that, if you don't want to even entertain and be with the word Christ, is to be aware that the actual design of your soul behind the threshing floor of life, of all the have-tos and shoulds and everything that we're required to do to manage our life's affairs, what is behind all of that is an ability to give and receive kindness, to allow it to work within you. This is what is called the Lenten season, a time of Lent, which is a church. It is a church creation. But if I allow personally to allow any of that to be set aside, the churchianity of spirituality, what remains is a time of preparedness. Preparedness for a birthing of something wonderful, something new. A time of renewal. And if there's anything that each person in this room can relate to, it's a desire for a time of renewal, a time of a new beginning, a time of regeneration, a time of resurrection into and with an alignment of the actual self, the higher self that we are. So every week we come, at least I do, here to remember. This is about remembering. It's an interesting word, to remember, to bring back parts of self together again, to remember. That's what the word religion means. Religare comes from the Latin, to knit back to and come back together again. That's what these teachings are all about. So this standard of being is not some way off, far off time. If you think about your life experience and when you show kindness to another person in your life, or you show kindness to yourself, you're practicing Christ consciousness. That's how close it is. It's now. If you're sitting where you're at right now and you're loving yourself, you're practicing Christ consciousness, because that's what it's all about. It's a consciousness of love and truth. It's an interesting story that my father-in-law sent me not too long ago. There was a man in New York City. He was a minister and he had a church. His name was Harry Emerson Fosdick. And John D. Rockefeller built this big church for him in the 1920s or 30s. And one Easter morning, when that huge church was filled to multiple services, he said something very interesting. He said, "Yes, I believe Jesus was divine, but so was my mother. She must have been a woman of great kindness." So here's this very prominent minister saying this. So we have to remember that this Jesus Christ standard isn't just about being divine. It's about being fully human too, and bringing the two together as one. That's the opportunity that each one of us have to have in this lifetime, if we choose it. We don't have to choose it. What is it for? What is unity for? What are the teachings of the most sacred religions of the world for, if not to help us to remember that we live in this consciousness, this sea of intelligence that is here with us now. Even in this moment, it's here now. So in closing, I would just invite you, ask yourself when you leave here today, or even when you're still here, how can I be more kind? What can I do to be more kind in this life? And I'm going to be walking right along with you. It's a practice of taking another person's hand, like that wonderful, giving somebody a boost. That's a good one. I like that. You never know what images are going to be popping up here. But that says a lot, doesn't it? Looking over the blank wall to see what's really there, helping each other out. So, yes, it is a choice. And divinity is not a choice to be holier than thou. It is just simply showing up and loving each other. Thank you.